I moved to Scotland when I was 10 years old. My family made the call and off we went. 12 years later, and I'm still here. And honestly, most of what I know about living in this country is stuff you can only get from living here. So here's the thing. There are about 1,000 videos on YouTube showing you castles in the mist, men in kilts, bagpipes, and all that lovely stuff. But if you're thinking about actually living here, or you're just curious about what day-to-day life actually looks like, beyond the tourism brochure, that's what I want to talk about. The honest stuff. So let's start with the thing everybody thinks they know about Scotland. The weather. Let's get this one out the way first because it's the thing everybody asks about but almost everybody gets wrong. The weather in Scotland is not a bit rainy, it's properly wet. And it's not like dramatic tropical storms where the rain chucks down for an hour and then completely disappears. Most of the time, it's a constant drizzle, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks. There's a word for it here, dreich. Dreich weather means grey, miserable, and wet. And you will hear that word a lot between November and March. You also get the 4 seasons more often than you'd expect in one afternoon. The weather forecast is treated as more like a rough suggestion. Nobody really trusts it. But something people seem to forget is that Scots don't wait for good weather to live their lives. We just don't. The first time the temperature hits about 15 degrees after a long grey stretch, all the men take their tops off, pubs fill out onto the street, and the parks fill up completely. Everyone's in a genuinely great mood. And it's because we've learned to squeeze every drop out of the days, no matter what the weather. But when the good weather comes out, you best believe we'll be making the most of it. And in fact, there's a very common saying in Scotland. It's that the weather isn't bad, you're just not wearing the right clothes. Now, when I first moved here at 10, my dad came just before us and the rest of the family to scout Scotland out. While he was here, the sun shone for a whole week. Best weather ever imagined in Scotland. So as you can imagine, he was pretty excited to bring his family here. But of course, as soon as we arrived, it proceeded to rain for 6 months straight. And then we just got used to it. Not in a resigned, defeated way. In a genuine, this is just part of the deal way. You stop checking the forecast, you buy a decent waterproof jacket and you just get on with it. And now, to be completely honest, I absolutely love the cold, grey, wet days. That rain is what allows Scotland to be so lush. The beautiful and dramatic scenery is almost always enhanced by the rain. And you've got to remember, rainbows don't exist without rain. And let me tell you, when it rains over dramatic scenery and the rainbows come out, there's hardly anything as beautiful as that. Also, the rainy days really do make you appreciate the sunny days. And on sunny days, everybody in Scotland is out doing things, activities, seeing friends, and enjoying the weather. Now, the weather's the easy bit. The trickier thing to talk about and explain, and the thing that took me years to adjust to, are the people, especially when you're living here. Now, this section, this is just my experience. People will disagree, and that's fine. Drop it in the comments, but I can only speak from the heart. When I landed in Scotland, I was 10 years old. I was the new kid with a very, very strange accent. I was born in South Africa and raised there for 7 years before moving to China with my family. Now, my teachers in China just happened to be Canadian. So combine a Canadian accent and a South African accent with the fact that I was a bit chubby before my growth spurt, and you get a recipe for ridicule. In fact, I actually got bullied so badly in my first school that I had to change school. My parents sent me to a private school where there were other international students from expat families, and this was the best decision we could have made for me. But kids can be cruel and schools can be tough. The private schools and the public schools, and they both have different challenges. I have been to both, and unfortunately I've had to defend myself physically multiple times in both systems throughout my childhood. And that's the nastier side of Scottish culture. Fights are common, size and strength is respected, and physicality is a currency in school, especially in a country where rugby is religion and sectarian lines are drawn. Now, I'm actually very grateful for this upbringing because it made me a much stronger and driven person who is willing to defend myself. And in hindsight, it feels like a kind of rite of passage. In my late teens and the present day, I went on to represent Scotland in the sport of field hockey, and I genuinely don't think I would have been able to make that happen if it wasn't for the physicality present in my childhood. Now, I found that as everyone gets older, everyone gets much friendlier. The aggression and physicality that manifests itself in young men at schools seems to disappear. However, I believe personally that it just gradually transfers to football and other outlets. You'll understand what I mean if you ever go to a Scottish football game. The hate and aggression from the fans will absolutely shock you. It feels like a complete contradiction to the friendly reputation Scotland has abroad. Now, I actually have a funny story to illustrate exactly what I'm talking about. I was in Australia and I bumped into a Scot who supported a different football team to me. Now, the only reason I told him what team I support is because he asked. And I won't divulge which team I support on this channel because I do not want that smoke. but he actually wanted to fight me over it. However, I managed to avoid it by telling him that we were in Australia, so our club allegiances didn't matter here. And he actually accepted that as valid reasoning, and we went our separate ways. Now, I know that section might make growing up in Scotland sound horrible. It's not. I have some incredible friends who I've known pretty much since arriving here and who would have my back no matter what. And Scots are extremely welcoming to newcomers and tourists. But it can be a hard place to live until you find your crowd. But once you find your crowd, you're gonna have the best time ever. So good to bear that in mind. But beyond the social side of things, there's the practical stuff. The day-to-day reality of actually living here. The stuff those tourism videos just doesn't touch on. Right, let's talk money. Because it's the bit tourism videos skip, but really does matter if you're actually planning on living in Scotland. Housing in the cities, Edinburgh especially, has gone up massively. And I mean a lot. You're competing with students, young professionals, Airbnbs, and wealthy foreign money. Now in rural areas, you've got a different problem. City money buying second homes or holiday homes on islands like Skye and in Scotland's other most beautiful locations is pricing out the youth. Young folk who have grown up in some of Scotland's most picturesque areas suddenly can't afford to live there. And that's a genuine tension. And you can feel it if you spend any time in the Highlands and Islands. Energy bills. Energy bills in a stone cottage in February, absolutely eye-watering. Newer built buildings are much more heat and energy efficient. But a lot of our properties are Victorian or older and therefore protected by heritage law. So that means you can't make changes to the building. Meaning buying an older property is a big decision that you'll need to consider seriously, because making changes that can improve the heat and energy efficiency, often you just can't make them. Rent across the Central Belt is extremely high because of the sheer volume of university students. Demand is very high, and obviously that means prices will also be high. Outside the Central Belt, rent is much more reasonable. For example, Perth and Dundee have reasonable rent because they're out with the Central Belt, whereas Glasgow, Edinburgh and Stirling can be extremely expensive. What ends up happening is a lot of young people stay with their parents until their mid to late 20s, saving for their own home, or they move abroad sooner to countries like Australia or Canada for their early professional careers, which is becoming more and more common. Public transport. Intercity public transport is excellent and frequent, especially buses and trains. However, something to bear in mind is we do have train strikes relatively often. However, if you live somewhere rural, you're going to need a car. In the cities, you absolutely do not need a car. However, if you're wanting to explore Scotland, then without a car, that's going to be almost impossible. But here's the good side. Groceries are reasonable. You can still get a proper pub meal and eat out without having to take out a loan. And as I said, property prices and rent north of the Central Belt is much more reasonable than elsewhere in the UK. I'm 22 now, so I'm looking at this from the perspective of someone trying to figure out what building and life here actually costs. And the honest answer is, it depends where you are and what you do. But I'd rather give you an honest answer than pretend it's all affordable and easy. Because it isn't. And that reality, the cost, the housing, is a big reason why something else is happening in Scotland. Now, there is currently a mass exodus of young people leaving Scotland. It's a real thing. Fewer opportunities in rural areas, housing costs, and the pull of big cities down south or abroad. I know a lot of people who have gone, and some of them won't come back. A very common occurrence in Scotland is young people after university will move to Australia or Canada on very easily acquired working visas, and will end up settling down abroad. However, a surprising number of them actually return later in life once they've got kids because they'd like to raise them in Scotland. You can't escape the magic of this country for too long. There's a quiet pull here that's hard to put into words. It's not loud, it's not flashy, and it's definitely not going to chase you. Scotland doesn't sell itself to you, it just waits, and inevitably, most people return. Is it perfect? The weather is rough for months at a stretch. The housing situation frustrates young people. Young folk leaving rural communities is a real issue, not just a statistic. But the thing about Scotland is it doesn't pretend to be perfect. It doesn't need to. The good stuff more than makes up for the rest. I came here when I was 10 and I didn't have a say in it. 12 years later, I'm still here. And this time, it was a choice. If you're thinking about moving here, or you're just curious about what Scotland's actually like beyond the castles and the bagpipes, drop it in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them honestly. Not the tourism brochure version, the honest one, the real one. And look, if you disagree with anything I've said in this video, please drop it in the comments. This is just from my personal experience. I genuinely want to hear your side of the story. That's the whole point of this. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.